New Zealand versus England women's series in New Zealand at the moment. England are currently 3-1 up with one T20 to play, which I think starts at midnight tonight. So it's a properly sociable time to start watching cricket. And then there's 3 ODIs as well. England gone pretty well.
Yeah,
Did you
they have.
expect them to go as well?
I think on the face of it, yes, I probably did. I probably did because New Zealand, for me, are pretty reliant on Sophie Devine and Amelia Kerr in both facets, both gun all rounders, like both of them in top 5 all rounders in the world, you would probably say. They were obviously missing for the first game due to their IPL commitments or whatever. England, in saying that, they had 4 of their big guns also missing going into the first 3 games. In fact, in Alice Capsey, Nat Sciver-Brunt, Sophie Eccleston, and Danny Wyatt. But it feels like the depth of the England squad is probably a bit more advanced than that of New Zealand on the face of it. And yeah, England have dominated, I would say, other than that game that obviously New Zealand won, where it felt like England collapsed a little bit in the run chase after setting up a pretty good platform from Boucher and Tammy. I think was the big partnership, and obviously Boucher, she's been fantastic in the series, leading run scorer, averaging 70 odd, with a top score of 91 in the 4th game the other day. But yeah, other than that collapse that they had, where they needed 25 off of the last 4 overs, 3 down, and then managed to lose 5 wickets for 21 runs and lose the game by 3 runs. England have done pretty well. We mentioned before we started recording, like, it feels as though there's been someone that's been able to come in and strike at a really good lick around an anchor that's batted for the majority of the innings, which it feels like has been quite a key component to, I guess, their success. Yeah, I don't know if you've got any other thoughts.
I think that point really stood out to me. It was really refreshing to see, actually, when you watch the highlights, and mostly you kind of read what you can from the scorecards when England are in New Zealand, because it is such an unsociable time to watch cricket. But when you look at the scorecards and you see Heather Knight striking at 160, and I think Maya Boucher yesterday was, off the top of my head, I don't know, but 162. Obviously, Nat Sciver-Brunt went out there and struck at 207. Heather Knight went out there and struck at 233. It feels like it's been building for a while for those strike rates to get up to that kind of T20 level of what I think cricket fans have become to expect from the men's game. And it's been really nice to see the fact that those strike rates have been as high. But it certainly did stick out a little bit of in that scorecard. You had one batter almost going at 100, 105, 110, which is no mean feat at the end of the day. If anybody's tried to go out there and play cricket and go at more than the run of ball, they'll realise it's still a bloody difficult effort to go and do it. But then there is that other person there that's going at 160, which I think is really it's refreshing. And I think obviously with the Ashes coming up in 2025, this England team, they've got to do something different in order to make these Australians think about what's going to happen in this series, because it's been too easy for Australia in those past series. Maybe that's the way to go about it. Do you see that there could be a place where maybe there isn't an anchor and maybe you get 2 batters trying to strike at 160, or do you think that's still a little bit further down the line? Yeah.
I don't think it's beyond the realms of their capabilities. And like you say, like we always talk about England in particular and how they are trying to plan and look ahead to future Ashes or whatever. Obviously, with that schedule getting announced earlier in the week, it's pretty exciting. They'll be looking at trying different combos and trying to work out what their best tactic that they think is to try and counteract how good Australia are. But then, like, you think back to the Ashes last year, particularly the T20 section of it, because obviously England have been playing New Zealand in T20 so far. I don't know. I feel like they're the way that they went about it against Australia in last summer was pretty good. Like, they ended up winning the series, obviously.
Yep.
And that was without kind of Nat being available to bowl in those games as well. It does really feel like there is so much more depth within the England setup at the minute. Like, Lauren Bell's pretty much led the seam attack, obviously, with the big retirements in the past kind of 18 months. She stepped up. She's 23, 24, and kind of led the way in that sense. So you feel like it, by the time it comes round to the Ashes, like, these players will still be very young, but they'll actually have quite a lot of international experience behind them. And in those matches against Australia, you feel like that counts for quite a bit. So I guess it's trying to utilise these other series that they play against the other nations to try and build up, I guess, their international nous on that stage, to ultimately overcome the Aussies.
How big of an impact do you think the 100 has had on the selection of the women's team? Did you ever feel like there was a case of you could have an amazing Rachel Hayhoe-Flint or an incredible Charlotte Edwards-Karp and you would be like in the shop window, if that makes sense? Or do you feel like the 100 has kind of exaggerated and accelerated that slightly? And I think there's one player that really stands out as somebody that's had an incredible start to the 100 and that has almost been like thrust into the England team straight away. Whereas I think looking back, I don't know whether that same reception would have happened from the Charlotte Edwards-Karp or the Rachel Hayhoe-Flint. The player in mind that I'm thinking of is Mahika Gur. Turned up, bowled rockets for the originals and then ended up being capped at 17 years old last summer. Has that made a huge difference? Has that given England selectors a few more players to think about?
Yeah, 100%, undoubtedly. I think the 100's really been the key force probably behind a lot of these youngsters getting onto the international stage at such a young age, because often those crowds and stuff that we're seeing in the 100, okay, maybe not as much now, but they would be almost bigger events than playing on the international stage. So I guess they would see it as if they can produce against the best players in the world as well. If these youngsters can perform on that 100 stage, then you feel like they're pretty well equipped to handle it on the international stage as well, because they've dealt with playing in a bigger stadium in front of a bigger crowd against really good opposition. Their skills have stood up to the test. That their mentality and the way that they've gone about it's obviously been harnessed, and they've got that under wraps to some degree. I guess the difference just being that you're representing your country and you've got kind of that added pressure to deal with. But yeah, there's been numerous people as well as Mahika Gore that have kind of had their success in various editions of the 100 and then have been able to go out on the international stage and kind of reproduce that form, whether it's Alice Capsey, Lauren Bell, even Bess Heath in more recent times, Lauren Filer, like players like that. You just, yeah, it's going the right way. The 100 is such a big platform for England's international women's cricket at the moment, I would say.